Hi, this is PR Frank, and today I'm going to show you how to deal with tables in HTML and Dreamweaver. So first of all, we're getting started with brackets. It's just a text editor. You can use any text editor for this. I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to save that as an index file, .html. And I'll go ahead and put that just on my desktop in a new folder called tables, because this is a lesson on tables. So, of course, the first thing to build a web page, let's start that from scratch as a review. Inside the body here is where we are going to put our table. Now, it's not a surprise that the code for table is simply the table tag. So the way we structure a table is a little complicated, but I hope I can break it down for you very well. So there are basically two kinds of tags that go inside your table to define your table, and then there are other special ones to help style it appropriately. So first, let's start with our table row. Every table has a row, and the tag for that is TR, or table row. And inside of each row is the details, or the cells of each row. So each cell would have a TD tag, just like this. And for this, I'm going to go ahead and put 3 cells. And what those turn out to be are columns in a table. Now, when you're using tables with HTML, it's important not to use those for structural purposes. A long time ago, in the late 90s, it was appropriate to style your page with tables to kind of lay things out. But that's not appropriate anymore, because search engines will see the table tag and assume, hey, this is a chart of information organized into rows and columns with headers and row headers and that sort of thing. So it's important to just use tables if you want to display some information in the form of a table. Okay, so what we can do is we can take this table row with these 3 columns, or table details, and copy it. And let's just do that 3 times. So now we have 3 rows with 3 columns each. It's very simplest. This is how it's done. You have a row with 3 cells, a second row with 3 cells, and a third row with 3 cells. So let's put some content inside of each of these details, these table details. So let's assume that this is about, let's say, dogs. Okay, so we're going to list some different dogs and their features and maybe their size. Okay, so we'll say breed, feature, size. And in these 2 rows, we're going to list a couple of breeds. Now, this is where it gets a little complicated when you're just coding it. What you have to think about is the first column, or this first cell, is associated with the very first one of the next row as well. So if I'm going to list a breed, I need to list it here, and I need to list it in the first set of TD tags in the next row. So right here in this row, in this row, one breed is, we're going to say, golden retriever. That's a popular one. And in the first cell of the second row, or really the third row in this case, we're going to list Chihuahua. I hope I spelled that correctly. Now we're going to go to the second row and write in a feature of the golden retriever, because this second cell corresponds with this second cell, or the detail. So a feature of the golden retriever is it is friendly. Okay, and the Chihuahua is not friendly. Now, if you are a Chihuahua owner, I don't mean to offend you. I'm just trying to fill in some information here. The size, okay, these are generally large breeds, and the Chihuahua is generally a small breed. So now that we have our table, our 3 rows, and our 3 details in each row, we are going to save it and preview it using the little preview button here. And it opens up in Chrome, and we can see it doesn't look awesome at all. But it does have basically what's going to become a table. So we need to style it so that the table is easy to look at and has some borders on it and maybe some headers. So let's first of all, let's focus on making a style sheet. So here in brackets, we can go to New, and we can go to File, Save As, and I'll navigate to where our tables is. And I'd like to put my style sheets in a separate folder called CSS, and we'll call this styles.css. So in this style sheet, we are going to style some things. We're going to make sure that we have a table selector. And in that table, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll give it a width. Okay, we'll give it a width of, let's say, 80% of our browser width, okay, or whatever it's contained inside of. Okay, now we also need to make sure that we have some borders, okay, and if we just write table and put a border there, it's only going to be around the outside of the table, okay? So we could say border, and we could say 1 pixel solid black, right? But it's only going to give our table a border around the outside. So we also need to add to this TD so that each of our details also has a border around it, which is 1 pixel solid black. So if we save that, go back to our index, and inside of our head, we create the link tag. Now the link tag looks like this. It's related to a style sheet. And it is the type text.css or text/css. And we need to do an href, which is a hyperlink reference to the actual file. So right here, we go into CSS and then CSS and then styles.css, and finally put a right angle bracket on the end. That links our style sheet to this document. So if we save that and we go back to our preview, we can see that it has borders around it. It's 80% of the width of the page, and it's got these borders around everything. If I zoom in on this a little bit, you can see there's some spacing here, okay? So sometimes people don't like that, and they'd rather collapse those borders. Okay, so back here in our style sheet, we can also, under a table TD, we can do border collapse. As you see, it's there, and collapse is what we want. If I save that, you can see now the borders are collapsed on our page. Okay. So now we have something that looks more like a table. Okay, so some more details about how to build tables here. One thing we can do back in the index, instead of having TD tags in our first row, we can put TH tags, okay? And then instead of details, that means, hey, this is a header for each of these columns. And you'll see that after we save that and preview it, it gives it a different kind of look here at the top. But now our table's a little bit messed up. You see there's no borders around there anymore. And that's because right back here in our style sheet, we also have to add the TH so that we know that our THs also have these 1 pixel solid black border collapsed style attached to it. So now we have something that resembles more of a table. Okay. So that's your basic table. You can do lots of other things with tables using your style sheet. You can do background colors. You can center your content. You can add some padding and all sorts of things around the cells. And so you can experiment with that on your own. A good place to go for that is W3 Schools. They've got a really great set of tutorials on how to create tables. Just search that up there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to try to create the same exact thing using Adobe Dreamweaver. So I'll go to Dreamweaver, and as a reminder here, what we're going to do is we're first going to just set up our site. So it's really important when you start in Dreamweaver to go to Manage Sites first, and I'm going to create a new site. I'm going to call it Tables, and I'm going to tell it, you know what, this is in a folder on my desktop called Tables. And really another important thing, and maybe not for this particular lesson, but in sites in general, you want to drop down Advanced Settings and go to Local and tell it where your Images folder is. I don't have an images folder because I'm not using images for this tutorial, but don't forget that while you're setting up your site. So I'll save that and I'll click done. And now it shows me the file structure over here in the files panel. It's really important. But I'll go ahead and I'll create a new file. It's going to be an HTML file. And in the beginning of Dreamweaver setup, it always wants you to define a title. So I'm going to write table there. It's an HTML5 file. I don't want to attach any CSS, although I do have an HTML, or I do have a CSS file there. I'm going to kind of recreate this from scratch. So I'm going to go click on a create. Okay. And so it's already created everything here that I did from scratch, but it also added a meta tag. That's okay. I'm going to go to File, Save As, and because this is all in the same folder, I'm going to name this one index2.html. All right. So now I have that. So if I want to put a table in here, you'll notice that I'm in split view and live. There's live and design view. You can choose from either. I'm going to make sure that I position my cursor inside the body before I do the next step. And the next step is to go to my insert panel. I can also go to my insert menu to do this, but I'm going to go to my insert panel. And as you can see, one of the choices is table. Once I click that, it comes up with a dialog box that allows me to choose a lot of different things before I get started. So one of the things that I want to choose is how many rows and columns. It already has 3 of each. It asks me what I want my table width to be. Let's go ahead and set that to 80, just like our other one, 80%. Our border thickness was 1 pixel. We didn't have any cell padding or cell spacing. And it gives us a choice for a header, either none on the left, both, or at the top. So I'm going to choose top. And we didn't get to talking about captions in the text editor, but I'll go ahead and add a caption now just to show you what that'll do. So let's pretend our caption is, dog. So let's come up with a very generic title, all about dogs. I think I wrote a paper about that in the 5th grade called All About Dogs. And I'll go ahead and click OK just to see what all that does. And as you can see, it injects all this code in here and gives us a table ready to go. It gives us, as you can see, a caption tag where All About Dogs is inside and All About Dogs is typed at the top. Inside of our opening table tag, it defines inline here, it defines 2 attributes, the width attribute and the border attribute. Okay, we're not going to keep those in there, but they're in there for now. We have a table row with which, as you can see, because we told it to have a header at the top, we have a TH tag. It also has an attribute called scope, which is just an added thing that Adobe Dreamweaver decides to add to say, hey, this table header is for this column. But it's assumed we don't really need it, but that's what Dreamweaver puts in. It also puts in a non-breaking space. That's what this and in BSP is in Dreamweaver. It helps to kind of fill those cells with some kind of content to begin with. All right. It does that with the second 2 rows, and it actually uses this table body tag to wrap around all of the content of that table, which is also inside of the table tag. So it does things a little differently. It's not necessary, but it's Dreamweaver's way of playing it safe so that you can code without some of the errors that people will run into if they don't know anything about HTML. So we can put our content in one of 2 ways. We could go ahead into our code and we could type in what we did before. Okay, so we had breed, we had feature, and we had size. Okay, and as you can see, it's updating right here. Now, I could also type it in up here, but in live view, it's not going to let me type in there. Well, I guess it is now. But if I switch over to design view, now it's going to let me easily type in here. If I click right in there, I can type in what the breed was, and the first breed was golden retriever. The second breed was Chihuahua. Okay, a feature of a golden retriever is friendly. The feature of a Chihuahua presumably is not friendly. Size, large and small. And as you can see, it's updating our code from top to bottom here. So now that we have that, we can begin to style our table. So I guess one of the easy things to do is to come on over here to the CSS designer, and we want to create a new CSS file just like we did when we were doing it from scratch. I'll click on Browse. And inside of our tables folder, we're going to also, if we expand this, we can make a new folder. And I'm going to call it CSS2 because there already is a CSS folder. And inside of there, there's going to be a styles.css file. I'll save that. And we're going to, of course, add it as a link. We'll be able to see right here in our head that it added a link tag, which is very similar to the one we created before, except now it links to the CSS2 folder that we've created. So if I want to begin to add selectors, I'm just going to go and click on something here, like my table, and click on the plus sign for selectors. Now Dreamweaver adds extra things that I don't need. Of course, it's a table that's inside of the body. I only need the table. I can press enter, and now it gives me choices of what properties to add. Of course, I want to add properties here that define the width of my table. Okay, and I did that in percentages, and I want my percent to be 80%. Now, because in our table tag we have a width attribute defined, it's going to override whatever we have in our style sheet. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm also going to get rid of the border because we're going to define that in there as well. Okay. So the next thing we have to do over here in our CSS designer, we need to add a new selector. And this selector is going to include not only table, but we're going to add some commas. It's also going to include any table detail and any table header that we have. If we press enter, now it gives us that new set of selectors, and we will go to the borders section, which is here. It jumps down, and we can make sure we add a border with a width 1 pixel, a style of solid, a color of black. And since we want those borders to collapse, we can scroll down a little bit more here, and we can find border collapse, and we click on the border collapse, and it adds the border collapse, and as you can see, it did collapse those borders after all. So that's how we do tables in using code and in using Dreamweaver. Have a great day.